Okay, let's see what this whole thing is with Diablo 4. There's a patch that just dropped, and apparently this person, RageGamingVideos, I'll share the link real quick in YouTube chat. Apparently, they're saying that this is disgraceful. More nerfs found. The devs confirm more changes, and Season 1 is ruined. Okay, that's a lot. Okay. Oh no, not this guy. Is this guy a lot? I don't know him. Because there was another guy that also did a video on it. I have a feeling I'll figure out pretty quickly if this is a guy that we want to watch. So let's see. Let's see how bad Diablo 4 is.
Big time. Patch 1.1 dropped yesterday for Diablo 4, and literally not a single soul on the planet is actually happy about this patch, and there is no way to put this lightly. Hype for Season 1 for the vast majority of players has been killed, just completely wiped out. There are at least a dozen major things that players have been asking for, things that are genuine issues we've noticed in the hundreds of millions of hours, by the way, of playtime that the community has racked up as a whole. Things that make the game just sort of frustrating currently, and how many of those were fixed in this patch? Exactly zero.
As a YouTuber, I can appreciate his eye energy, but it does sound like he's hyperventilating and about to pass out.
They weren't even mentioned. On top of that, they made every single character weaker offensively.
Okay, let's see. Developers note the core stat bonus on weapons has been overperforming, so we're pulling back on this bonus. Strength 50% stronger when on weapons. 25% stronger when on weapons. Dexterity. So they halved all of that. Cooldown reduction of fixes often felt mandatory due to their raw power. We imagine cooldown reduction will remain a highly desirable stat, but the penalty for not prioritizing it won't be as harsh. Okay. And we're seeing critical strike damage and vulnerable damage often viewed as a hard requirement for a build success in Diablo 4. We believe this is a step towards allowing more builds to flourish and will continue to make changes in support of this role. Okay. I mean, I don't have a problem with balancing, like if they're just balancing stuff out. Like why would I be that pissed about it? Like, okay. Asmund said the game is significantly worse because of this patch. I mean, to be fair, I haven't played it, so I haven't played this new patch. I don't know how it changes it, and I would imagine that hardcore ARPG players probably have a feel for it. My concern with all this, though, seeing significant stat changes where you're having the effect of things, that makes me worry that they're trying to increase the grind, and I don't like that.
They limited our top end potential a significant amount, and hey, how about a nerf to survivability across the board that makes even the tankiest of builds no longer actually feel tanky in.
So why would they do this? Total armor reduced by 30%. Were they just getting complaints the game was too easy and this is their response? Damage reduction from enemies that are burning reduced by 25%. Yeah, they just nerfed toughness across the board. So are they just trying to make the game harder? Oh, I don't know. Cal, good to see you, my friend, by the way. And how is it being a new dad? It's very good. I'm loving it. I'm loving it. I mean, I've been a dad for 2 years now because Lockie's about to turn 2, but yeah, 2 little ones in the house. Ooh, never a dull moment.
Any real way. Oh, one of my favorite bits, cooldown reduction was being prioritized by players, so they nerfed it to make it feel less annoying if you don't have it. What? This is a gross way to interpret that. The way to make it feel less of a detriment to not have cooldown reductions is to reduce the cooldowns for everyone. Sure, go ahead, nerf the cooldown reduction stat, but only if you're going to compensate that by reducing these cooldowns that people were actually using the stat for.
Yeah, that objectively doesn't make any sense at all. Like what? Reduce the cooldown reduction, but don't deal with the actual problem at all. Okay, that doesn't make any sense.
The ones that people thought that this stat was necessary to be able to use, because for the most part, people weren't using this stat to get overpowered. They were using it to just make builds function as a base in the first place. And by nerfing this, you've essentially just killed a number of builds without offering any alternatives. It sucks. And this is just one of many examples of the things in this patch that I don't agree with in the slightest.
I mean, I can understand. I'm just trying to play devil's advocate and look at this fairly, to be clear. Like, I'm not trying to defend stupid decisions. I'm just trying to understand this and like try to offer various perspectives. But like, on the one hand, if the devs are looking at it and are saying, okay, so this is an ARPG where you're supposed to create varied builds, And we've found through our data that we collect on all these builds that the vast majority of endgame players all have this one trait because it's basically necessary to be competitive in the endgame. And then they go in and they're like, okay, well then let's balance this so you don't need that trait anymore. That's understandable. I don't think anybody would have a problem with that. The problem here is that they aren't actually fixing the issue. They're not actually fixing why people are all using this trait. They're just making that trait worse, so it doesn't fix anything. It's just really, really dumb.
Before I get too deep into it, it's pretty apparent.
They must be prepping for set bonuses, says Mike in YouTube chat. There's a certain way they want us to play. So sad. Yeah, I feel like there's something else going on here, like, because this doesn't make any sense. Buffs for cash coming soon. Maybe. Because as we've said before, when there are changes being made to the game that just flatly don't make any sense at all, usually it's because there's some nuance or some change that we aren't seeing yet that explains it. In Warzone, you guys remember, like, back in the heyday of Warzone, just a couple of years ago, they released, maybe the best examples were like the Gallantry little MAC-10 gun, or I think it was the FFAR, the FFAR, that thing. They were totally broken guns, totally busted. Like, if you were not running this thing, you were not competitive, right? And it just so happened that they had those available in the store for purchase. So it's insane. So they break the game and then they sell you the solution to it being broken. You know, that's what I'm worried is going on here, where they're breaking the brand or breaking the game, and then they're going to sell you back the solution, which is just super, super slimy. And David, it was Raycon. I still have them. I think they're actually upstairs with my Vitcher glasses.
That the developers are aware of just how angry the community is about all of this, because they scheduled a surprise campfire chat developer stream for this upcoming Friday out of nowhere within 8 hours of the patch coming out. They want to talk about this now, and this is possibly the most dangerous thing that they could do realistically, and I'll make it clear why. The community is extremely frustrated with the changes that the team chose to focus on for this, and the changes that the team refuses to make as well. If they do this stream and they don't offer any actual timelines on actual changes that people have been asking for, if they don't say something like, hey, yeah, we'll add more stash space next week, it's just going to make people even angrier. As it currently stands, a large percentage of the player base is just completely demoralized about the concept of playing this game now. They just don't care. This patch is simply one of the biggest letdowns in recent gaming history. Diablo 4 at launch was fun. They did some nerfs, of course, but then they did some buffs, and everyone was feeling pretty good about it.
Does anybody watch this guy's stuff? Do you know if he's one of them that was complaining about this game from day one? Or has he been pretty level-headed? Because I know that there's a ton of people out there who were more hardcore, and from launch, they're like, this game's horrible, this game is terrible. So I don't know if this is somebody who's just kind of riding the trend, or if he's actually being real in that his opinions changed with this patch exclusively, you know? Because that if his opinion has honestly been changed, fair enough. Like, I'll try to consider it as level-headedly as I can, but I'm not so sure yet that that's what's going on.
Right? Then we all knew Season 1 was approaching. We were all sort of building hype for it. We all knew there was going to be a big patch right beforehand. Maybe it would even fix some of the issues that we had. After all, since launch, players have been politely bringing up issues that they thought needed to be fixed when it came to monster density in the game. Certain monsters doing enough damage to one-shot characters, which just feels unfair, especially when it's not super high content. The whole resistance system in the entire game just not functioning properly, which not only makes all of us squishier, but absolutely screws over sorcerers, whose main stat is intelligence, and they should be basically immune to resistances as a result of that, but they aren't. Dungeon Finder, or just general looking for group systems, as they sort of built Diablo 4 to essentially be the Diablo MMO. Stash changes or upgrades because we desperately need more stash space.
I will say, yeah, from what I've played, the stash system is really dumb, especially with the gems. If you have any gems at all, it's just a disaster to try to carry stuff and explore. Like, half of your inventory ends up just filled with gems that you need to carry back because you have to combine them to get higher end gems. It's just really, really dumb. And there's no reason to do that. Like, unless they're going to prepare to like start selling us bigger stashes for $20, you can carry twice the stuff. I don't know why they would do that.
Not to mention the ability to filter loot that is in your stash or even your inventory in different ways. Things like by type of legendary aspect, by specific legendary aspect, even freaking alphabetically would have helped a significant amount. And all of these issues, which aren't even all of the issues, just the top of the barrel, not a single one of these, not even one, was even mentioned in this massive patch. The only real thing I consider a meaningful positive change, they made it so the max level requirement of sacred items is now 60, and the max level requirement of ancestrals is now 80, which is good for your alt characters. Too bad that they killed alt leveling hard, and so a ton of players who would have gotten to enjoy this change now just will not interact with it because of that. That said, okay, maybe they are working slowly, right? I can handle that. Maybe they are planning to work this stuff out during the season, right? If the only bad news is that they didn't address quality of life concerns, that is annoying but not game destroying. Well, what if I told you that they reduced all of the relevant gear stats by an insane amount? The thing is, the game is built on math at its core. Realistically, the math was created while they were making the game in a way that makes damage multipliers worth more than additives. That's just the way that math is. Specifically, this was applying to crit damage and vulnerable damage, ending up making them more valuable than pure damage additive increases.
Yeah, dude, reducing vulnerable damage by 65%, like, Jesus. Like, these are not little changes. And I think that's the broader point. Like, these are huge changes. These are big shifts that have a real impact. Like, it's not, oh, we adjusted the bullet spread of this rifle by 2.27%, and then we balanced the speed of the bullet velocity by 0.72%. Like, no, we are nuking this thing, and this thing is totally useless now. These are not small changes. And for them to make like huge changes like this, you have to ask why. Their explanations don't really make a lot of sense. Disparities in inherent affixes can rule some weapons out before the rest of their stats are even rolled. Okay. These are receiving harsher reductions than their normal affix counterparts to increase weapon flexibility. It just looks like they're trying to find whatever the meta is or whatever people are really enjoying using, and then they're breaking that so that you have to go and build something else. I guess maybe what this is all about is that they are simply trying to make, like, for example, I don't actually know what the meta is now, but they're just trying to take really committed players and then get them really upset so that they have to come back and redesign their characters and keep playing to figure out what the new meta is now that their current like meta is not actually that useful or viable. Again, it's the same exact thing that Activision, owned by the same company, of course, it's the same exact thing that they did with Call of Duty, where they have for Warzone certain metas that are clearly the best guns in the game. I mean, watch any Warzone streamer, or if you watched them back in the heyday, like 2 years ago, or during COVID, there were all of these metas that were just phenomenal. You get the Car 98, and then you run a Fafar, or you run a Gallantry, or whatever it is, or the Pistols Akimbo, whatever it is that you're running, and that's just the meta for that day. And then Activision would come in, they would nuke it, they'd change it, nerf all the guns. Now they're useless, they're so garbage, so you have to keep playing and often buy stuff in the store in order to figure out what the new meta is. It seems to me like that might be exactly what's happening here, which is a little bit of a bummer. Hassan, by the way, thank you for becoming a member. Appreciate you. Maybe they're just going to sell re-rolls. Dude, if that's what they're doing this for, I don't know. But I would say even with it working the way it did before, they could have just left it that way as it's described here and sold re-rolls, and that would have been fine for what they were trying to do. I wouldn't have liked it, to be clear, but I think that would have achieved their same goal.
They obviously knew this when they made the game, though.
By the way, shout out to my wife, Nikki. She made homemade pretzels, and she brought me one down. Ooh, baby. I'm a sucker for pretzels, I'll tell you what.
Made it that way, and yet they still seem totally surprised that people were using this to their advantage. And so what did they do? They decided that this is bad. They nerfed crit damage, they nerfed vulnerable damage, both of them an insane amount. They nerfed cooldown reduction because they didn't like that people were having fun with that stat. They nerfed a ton of defense.
I mean, I don't think that's fair. I think they, like, either they're just incompetent or there's something else going on. But it wasn't because they were like, oh, people enjoy this thing, so we're going to nerf it. They were like, people are using this thing because, and that's like the mainstay mechanic that everybody has to use. So we're going to nerf it so that not everybody's using the same ability. We want you to be able to use all different abilities in combination. In other words, finding the meta and then breaking it so that you're forced to try something else, which in the context of a live service game, makes sense. They want you to keep playing and experimenting with all sorts of different builds. Makes sense. But just saying it's because they saw people were having fun and so they broke it is like a little reductive.
Defensive affixes on gear that made people actually able to take part in high-end content of the game. And why did they do all of this? Because they wanted to make the affixes on gear feel more equal so that you wouldn't feel pressed to have one over the other. What a load of horseshit. These affixes aren't equal because that's just how the game works. Some of them will be better than others. You specifically put all of the affixes in the game. You knew which affixes you were putting in. You knew some of them would be better than others. And you made the ones that you genuinely realized were better be rarer to acquire. So you clearly knew that they were all good. You made the enchanter prioritize certain ones when you realized that they were important, so you clearly knew that they were good. But because you want people to use weird niche flat damage increases instead, you reduced vulnerable damage upgrades across the board by 40%? That's insane. Yes, I agree that vulnerable was arguably too strong. It just was. Your build was at a significant disadvantage if you didn't have a way to apply vulnerable, and having vulnerable damage stats on gear was really good. And yet this does not fix that. This change doesn't change that. Vulnerable is still a multiplier, and so even without any vulnerable damage boosts on gear, having vulnerable is still really strong. You're still forcing people to use those skills. All you did was punish the people who were already using it and the people who were stacking the damage to actually make it a little bit better. Yes.
I mean, to be fair, almost any sort of balancing feels like a punishment to people using it already. Like, it was one of the frustrations people had when Activision would go in and they would nerf one of the meta guns and make it useless. And it was like, well, but I just started using it and I was getting really good with that weapon and now that weapon's useless. It's like, yeah, that's exactly the point, because they want you to have to go find a new build so you keep playing, you keep experimenting. That's how they do it. Like, I guess with all of this, I understand why he's upset. I understand why people say this is a really bad update, but I guess I don't see why anybody is surprised by this. Like, this is how live service games work, you know? Like, I feel like I'm missing something. I don't know. I guess if we're just making like videos and things to like complain about it, it makes sense, but still, I don't, you know, I feel like I'm missing something. Inhabor, thank you. Strange seeing you live on here instead of YouTube, but much love, man. Love the content. Thank you, my friend. And yeah, we're co-streaming, so we're here on YouTube and on TikTok at the same time. It's really trippy to me as well. Rich, what am I building? I am currently assembling some Scarab Occult Terminators. Really, really useful in like 2,000 point matches in Warhammer. So we're putting it together. Ooh, baby. Ooh, baby.
This does even the playing field, but it doesn't make the people who are doing low damage closer to the people doing high damage. It just pushes everyone down a ton in a really strange way. Just why? Why do this? Why do it in this way? Here's my biggest bit of constructive criticism here. These nerfs, they could be acceptable, but not in this way. You cannot apply this big of a nerf to the entire player base in one single patch, and you absolutely can't do it without also offering some significant buffs in other areas to compensate it. You have to make people actually want to play the game, and they did add some buffs, but they didn't add enough to compensate for just how much they destroyed certain things.
I agree. Dropping 65% reductions on stuff out of nowhere at the same time you're dropping debuffs on all sorts of stuff at the same time, it's going to make it so you could have a build that's very carefully built out and is very, very good. You log in on Sunday, it works great. You log in on Monday, all of a sudden it's totally useless. It's not able to keep up with the the bosses you're taking on, the dungeons you're crawling, like you're screwed. And that sucks. Like it probably is better served, or the audience and player base is better served by doing this incrementally, very slowly, so that it's not just like a system shock, you know? Brandon, you're a YouTube legend. Love seeing you on TikTok. Cheers. Thank you, my friend. Appreciate you and calling me a YouTube legend. Jeez. That's a lot. I don't even know how to respond to that. Is Nikki recovering from the birth? Yeah, no, Nikki's doing very, very well. She's doing very well. She's a super trooper. She got that baby, a 10-pound, 6-ounce baby. She got that baby out in 7 minutes of pushing. That's insane. I almost didn't make it back with my Starbucks. Like, I'm kidding. I did not go and get Starbucks in the middle of delivery, okay? I did not do that.
You have to make people feel like their time spent in the game so far has been meaningful in at least a little bit of a way, because doing this the way that they have, one gigantic nerf all at once without any truly compensating buffs, has just killed most hype for Season 1. And when I say this is one of the biggest fumbles in recent gaming history, Season 1 hype was actually riding decently high. Season 1 is now a day away, but was just 2 days after this patch. This was their big opportunity to address some quality of life issues, buff off-meta playstyles to let people swap things up and try new things that are actually could be strong in the season, and just really incentivize and foster that excitement for the season, make people enjoy playing the game, make people more excited for what's to come. What did we get? An absolute dump truck of changes.
And maybe that's the better alternative. Instead of nerfing stuff and taking the meta and crushing it, maybe it's better to just buff other stuff so it becomes more powerful than even that current meta. And then afterwards you can rebalance the old meta and bring it back down to a reasonable playing field, and then you just keep doing that. So it's kind of just like you boost this up, then you pull that down, you boost this up, then you pull that down. Whereas what they're doing now is they're just pulling stuff down, so it just feels really bad to the player. It just feels like, okay, you're just making all of my stuff worse. So it's just frustrating, you know? The nerfs don't seem so bad when you realize you're making a new character tomorrow. Well, Josh, I think that's absolutely what they are like banking on, is that a lot of people are going to be coming into the new season and not caring. My question, and I honestly don't know the answer to this, is how many of the players that are playing Diablo 4 currently, how many of them are more hardcore to the point where they're watching a video like this, where they're keeping up with streamers and YouTubers who cover this game in detail and are making their voices heard? And how many are just like casuals? We're like, no, I just play it. I don't really care what the updates are, what the meta is. I just play the game and have fun. I would guess, again, most players
Salvador
are probably
Lloret
like that.
Farina super chatted $6.56.
Thank you.
Would you prefer to be lauded as national trinket, international treasure than an online legend?
An international treasure than an online legend. I don't even know. National trinket or international treasure. I'm just glad that anybody lauds me as anything. I'll take that. I'll take that. Thank you, my friend.
Does that feel like they scream, we actually want you to take a break from the game and come back later? To put it simply, up until this point, I've been very fair, I feel like. I've been giving the developers a really big benefit of the doubt sort of thing, where I've not been judging them too hard on the minor changes that they haven't been making, on the major changes that they've been taking a while with. It's a really big game, and getting it perfect before launch was never going to be 100% on point. It just wasn't. But every time they've done nerfs and they've not addressed quality of life stuff, I've just sort of kept my chin up. I've accepted it. I've said they're doing it in the future, just give it a chance, give it some time, right? But today, after this patch, even after sleeping on it, trying to calm down about this whole thing, it feels like we paid to beta test this game. These are not changes that feel like they should happen a month and a half after release. These are changes that feel like they should have happened before launch, but they clearly didn't have enough people testing the high-end content before that, creating builds in the endgame, testing stats in the endgame, all of that, and now it feels like they've used us, all the people who spent a load of money on this game, to tell them, hey, this stuff is strong, by the way, and then they used that information to nerf the hell out of us.
I don't want to be like, I don't want to be dismissive, but this just comes off to me as like whiny bullcrap. Like, I get it. You're upset that your build is nerfed. I totally understand that. It sucks when that happens. But like, again, you're talking about a game that has thousands of hours of content, an insane amount of content and is extremely complicated. And now you're upset that they're trying to balance it after new stuff has been discovered since release. Like, I think if the point is, like, I think there's just a lot being said here, probably because emotions are high. If the point is you're upset because they're balancing, I think that's a stupid thing. If your point is you are frustrated that they are like allegedly nerfing, but the thing that they're nerfing doesn't need to be nerfed, or that what they're doing is not actually fixing the problem, that's a separate issue. Like, I think it's great that they're still working on it, trying to balance it, trying to do stuff like that. That's good. After launch especially, like, I have no problem with that. So his point currently is just dumb to me. But what he said before with like the changes they're making are not actually fixing anything, that's what should be focused on. It's just really dumb to be like, well, I'm really upset that they are like rebalancing stuff and changing things after the game launched. They should have done this before. Like, of course, thousands, well, millions of players actively trying to break the game and find whatever the min-max option is. Of course they found stuff that the devs didn't see coming. It would be impossible for them to account for everything. Like, actually impossible. So it's just kind of silly to me. Which class am you if I play Diablo? Oh, I go Necromancer. It's just fun. I like blowing up the bodies. It's just really satisfying. There are some like min-max things you can do with that, where you can chain effects together with the Necromancer stuff. So you can get some work done with it. This sounds a bit intense. Lol, was the game not already packed with content? Once again, sounds like some entitled BS. Yeah, I think what this comes off to me as is this is high emotions. This is somebody that plays a lot of this game, that cares about it, wants it to be really successful, and is frustrated that the devs are coming in and instead of trying to gently fix a problem, they're just bashing stuff with a hammer to see if they can make something happen. Like, and that just, it's like these models that I'm building. Like, if you have these models and there's a little piece of plastic that's hanging off, just a tad, just a little bitty piece of plastic. See if my hand focuses at all. Like, if there's a little piece of plastic hanging off of one of these figurines, you have to go in and you need the X-Acto knife and you have to carefully trim it off. That's how you get it in balance. That's how you get it where you want it to be. And this guy's frustrated that instead of doing that, these devs seem to be using an axe to chip off just a little problem, and they're just taking an axe to the problem and seeing if they can fix it that way. And that to me is a worthy frustration as somebody who's invested thousands of hours into this game. However, I think like focusing on and then complaining about stuff like that, they're fixing it, that they're trying to balance stuff, that's a stupid concern. Like, so I'm just asking for a little more specificity. And I think the reason it's all blending together is because he's just generally frustrated. He took my thing.